I've been grabbed the way a bone is grabbed by a dog and shaken about, and it won't let go of me. Even before Biden's speech, which I'm going to play a little tiny piece of for you, I was taken with the challenge of healing the polarities, healing the us, being able to talk to each other across differences and divides. As all of you know, in the United States, people are living in two different worlds, and there's tremendous fragmentation, in our culture now. I want to talk about the challenge of building bridges, feeling everyone as part of the us, even the people that you hate, even the people that you passionately disagree with, even the people that you wish weren't here on this planet. They are, all the people are part of the us, and all of the parts of ourselves, some of the parts of ourselves that we wish weren't there, some of the parts of ourselves that we disagree with. And it's building bridges within us and between us, and being able to be interested and curious about the differences and about the people and the parts of us that threaten us, rather than being derisive and denunciatory. So that's the challenge that sort of grabbed me here. I want to play you just a tiny piece of Biden's inauguration speech. And that's sort of a little risky. I mean, this is American politics. You people, many of you aren't even, citizens of the United States or even living here or anything. But I feel that Biden captured something that is very present for me and that I'm very passionate about. And I wanted to see what it says to you. Of course, this is not a social political group. We are a group of helpers, many of us overwhelmed helpers, needing help for ourselves. I am hoping that looking at the challenge of building bridges may not be a comforting idea, but maybe an enlivening one. And I'd like you to listen to it as a challenge, not only for American citizens, but a challenge for all of us, and to listen to it not only as pertaining to the left and the right in the United States making bridges, but also the bridges to parts of ourselves and the bridges to whomever you are embattled with. So what I want to talk to you today about is the experience of being embattled and the experience inside of fragmentation and polarization. And can Jean help us with that challenge that all of us face? So let's listen to Biden and see what he may bring up for you.
We have much to do in this winter of peril, much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging than the time we're in now. Once in a century virus, millions of jobs have been lost, hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself. Now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront to restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy, unity. On this January day, my whole soul is in this, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. With unity, we can do great things, important things. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep, but I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. Through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. Let's start afresh. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. The American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we, the people, who seek a more perfect union.
Let's take a breath there.
It just feels so immediately good that we have a leader who is espousing this. Of like if you were in a household with arguing children, it's important to have a parent who can bring forth the better values there.
I think for me, what came up was the meaning of the word unity. And I was thinking that sometimes it could be understood as being the same in a way that's actually not so comfortable. Dan Siegel talks a lot about about integration and how different regions of the brain sort of start working together and become integrated wholes, but not the same.
And that's so true in a focusing philosophy, that there's the uniqueness of all the parts of ourselves and of each person that's always prized. We never try to get rid of anything in focusing, a part of ourselves or a part of the us. All of the uniqueness of each aspect of the way that life manifests itself is valued.
So it's actually a celebration of differences, but in a linked way.
Yes. So it's with Greg Madison's metaphor, it's the inner democracy and the outer democracy of respect and interest in the differences within us and between us. The word unity is interesting there. That makes one whole. We are an us. There's a unity of usness, but within that us, there's incredible differences and challenges and oppositions. And
what came to me is the system that this problem came into life. American people, they work a lot, and to talk, to share, to understand each other, we need to sit and we need to have time. And when I say that, my belly is really cold, because that will be a challenge, a practical challenge.
Yes. And that's so true in terms of our inner democracy, that we have to have time to sit, to listen. And that's true between us also.
And the other aspect is the problem came because of the misinformation. So the unity has to be in the information too. And how to change the system. And this is a problem that we see all around the world. So communication, why do we have problems of communication, right, in the first place, in ourselves and in the world?
And what we consider information is also very important. You know, what do we dignify with the word information?
One of the big issues is the fear. I think fear divides so terribly. Everybody is frightened of something. And if we could only communicate, as Gigi is saying, and somehow connect,
Yes.
make connections at a core level, it would probably help a lot. If only we could comfort one another instead of threaten one another.
Yeah, I want to build on what she's saying, and that is what wasn't addressed, I think, as much was the forces that seek to disunify us. Nancy mentioned fear, but there's also disunity for profit. People make money off of us being divided, and that needs to be addressed.
My responses were all so much on the heart level, right? A lot of grief arose from me. You know, this tied in with my longing, right? For me, he gave voice to my deepest longing for the world that I want to live in. And combined with the imagery, you know, that both had, you know, the Capitol and the devastation because of the you know, the COVID, everyone sitting in the masks, and then the Republicans and the Democrats sitting together. I just felt this heart-centered level of, wow, the president actually speaking like the highest value, even with everything everyone's saying about strategically, whether it's actually achievable.
And Bob, your response is really so important too. The feeling that there are forces and people that want disunity, and then your question about how do we address that? Do we need cooperation of the people who would be invested in the disunity in order to build bridges? That's a big, big question. I am saying, to warm us up here with a hot topic, I am saying that we can meet this challenge no matter what anybody else is doing. And that I believe that focusing can help us to do that. That we don't wait for the other people or the other side or the other individual person that you're embattled with to change, that that we change ourselves, and that changes the system. And when you change the system, you're changing everything. We each have the ability, the empowerment, I believe, to change the conversation, to change the culture. Each of us has the ability to put something, a different ingredient, an ingredient of unity in the way we're defining it, into the system, no matter what anybody else is doing. And that's sort of where I'm in the challenge of this. I want to acknowledge that many people really feel like this is not a time for unity. This is a time really to fight what's wrong and to punish wrongdoers and to name the things that are unjust and wrong. It's a time of battle. I believe that we can have an experience of fighting for something without fighting against certain people. We can have the experience of both building bridges and really standing firmly for things that we believe in, and standing against things that we don't believe in, and still be building bridges to others. On the other side, the other side can be something very different for each of us, you know, our various countries, our various lives. But some people are also feeling like, I'm fed up. I don't want to understand these people who are hurting me.
I think that nonviolent communication can answer that by we can condemn the actions, but not the actor. seeing the person in front as a human being that wants only happiness, and that's their way to reach happiness.
Mhm.
So that it's in a way to feel respect.
I think that even those of us who have deep faith, the way you're talking about in nonviolent communication, that there may be parts of us who says, why should I? And even with family members that we're embattled with, or friends that we're embattled with, why should I? They're doing this and this and this. But this is a challenge for us, no matter what they are doing. People will say, I just have to let off steam. I just have to, what Gene would call pouring out. I don't know if you've read his wonderful paper about fitting in, pouring out, and relating.
It's difficult for me right now working with accountability and compassion. And those are two things that collide in a way, like not blaming, getting really furious or screaming or yelling at others, and wanting to listen, to quiet things down so I can ask questions of curiosity. But then putting it all behind me at this point is not the answer. It's going through it. And that's accountability and compassion for me.
There's something there about the alternative to embattlement is the alternative, just putting everything behind you and forgetting about it. And Julie is saying we have to go through something. Going through something with this challenge may be look very different than going through something without focusing. I'm kind of saying that a focusing perspective helps us to go through something in a very, very different way. And I think it helps us to always begin with how we're having the dialogue inside, what the inside place is living, and paying attention to that. The challenge doesn't begin with having a generative conversation with someone that you disagree with. It begins with what you're living inside. For me, it begins with the focusing attitude. And the focusing attitude of being open and receptive to all others is not about agreeing with all others or all parts of ourselves. And it's not about trying to stop certain things from happening. It's about the curiosity, the openness, and the centeredness in the larger self. And we have to take care of our embattled smaller selves in order to do that. And what does that care entail? How does focusing help us to care in the moment when we're getting triggered, or in the moment when we are feeling the battle, the fight or flight? How does focusing help us to care for that place? I was thinking that when I listened to Biden's challenge, I was thinking that the beginning point for me is about treating the other side, whoever the other side is for you, with respect, that part that he talked about. I receive so many good-hearted sort of emails and communications of derision about the other side, jokes that are taken for granted, that the kind of humiliation of the other side and jokes about how they're ignorant or crazy or mentally ill or whatever. There's an attitude of a contempt. And when I've pointed this out to people have said, well, I just have to get it off my chest. It's just a way of blowing off steam, and it's necessary. And I've given that a lot of thought because I think that people do need to discharge, to blow off steam, to pour out. But I think that the problem is that without really focusing on it, we may not know the difference between blowing off steam and communication. And in that wonderful article that I mentioned, Fitting in, Pouring Out, and Relating, Jean is saying that real communication, you may need to pour out or discharge something before communication, but it's not communication. And I think even in the social political situation, we may need to say, but I don't think we need to say on Facebook or Twitter or something, these other people are crazy, or I can't stand it, or whatever. But it's that feeling of this, something in me wants to say blah, 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 and separating that from the real communication feels to me very important. And for me, the commitment to this challenge, those of us who really want to take on the challenge of building bridges, the first commitment is the commitment to separate the pouring out, the getting it off our chest, the gut response from the real communication, to maybe say that gut response in a safe way that's not going to damage relationships, and then to settle and to focus and to say, what I really want to say is blah, 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 or what I really feel is blah, blah, blah. So that feels like to me, a very direct, simple, but such an important step. And it's something that doesn't take cooperation from the other side or the other person. It takes a deep commitment to wanting to protect the bridge building parts of ourselves, not to stifle the one that's exasperated. They may need to express themselves, but it can be done in a way that can be protecting the delicate seeds of what Biden is calling unity, protecting the us.
There is a couplet that says, Shiv mastu sarv jagata parhit bharta bhavantu bhutgana dosha prayantinasham sarvatra sukhi bhavatu loka. Nobody can be happy until all are happy. There's a basic assumption that everybody's happiness lies in everybody's happiness. And you pray for yourself, but you pray for the other party also, so that they would not have that unhappiness, that they would create that rift. And what is the reason? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I really appreciate that you brought this piece about the avenue to release and express for ourselves, for the parts in ourselves that are in opposition and outside of ourselves. And I was listening to a podcast by someone who works with extremists and therapeutically work with extremists. And he was saying one of the same thing, that by providing, he didn't say avenue, but I can't remember his word, but places where people can release some of the emotions that's there, be heard, have safe places. I mean, not everywhere this can happen. The other thing that I think is really important is to really be attentive to when it's happening before it's materializing, right? So in youth, in young people, where we already see the radicalize. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the isolation, or the depression, or the aggressivity, where we can address it then before it becomes much more solidify and harder.
I just want to extend what you're saying to paying attention to the isolated, depressed parts of ourselves, especially in this COVID time. You know, that we get to our wits' end where we have no energy to build bridges with anybody, no less to people that we don't live with.
Another aspect that comes to me, like in individual communication around anger and conflict, that once you let out the kind of angry words and the blame word when it's really big, I've just been thinking how you can't take back your words. They land, and they have this sense sometimes of landing forever. And I'm just thinking a lot about that, you know, the need to vent versus what impact does it actually have in the long run or the short long run.
I do think that with this, that we need maybe a whole session about this issue of pouring out. It's such a big one, but my partner is a therapist, and she has what she calls a theory of cleaning up after yourself. In self-psychology, they call that rupture and repair. But the repair, research has shown that the repair process makes new neural pathways in the brain in such a way that if you never had the rupture, it doesn't do that. So the repair, to have a rupture and a repair, makes more difference than if you don't ever say the thing. So the repair is when you go back and you say, I really didn't mean that. But there has to be this repair when there is rupture. And I think that politically, we need repair. There is no repair process of saying, oh, I said this inflammatory thing on Facebook and it did a lot of damage to bridges. And I really am sorry I said that. And that wasn't what I meant. I meant something else. That would make a huge difference.
I thought of Lynn last night when I was watching 60 Minutes. The story was on like the other victims of COVID, like not just the people that died, but the, you know, their families that were left behind. And they had one family, it was just, you know, somewhere in middle America. And my first thought was Trump. And then when I was watching the piece, there were two families. And one of them, the one kid has to take over his family's business. And the other kid, oh my God, this is so horrible. The father said, you're the man now. You have to take care of the family. The kid's only 15 because it's just his mother and his sisters. And then I just thought, oh my God, it doesn't matter who they voted for. Like, this is something we're all feeling. This is loss. This is being human. And this is horrible. That's it. That's so, it's like, I mean, I am not a focuser. I'm not a psychotherapist, but I'm listening to all this and, you know, we have to be curious, but it's like, no, open your heart. Like, these are human beings. And that's what will always bond you together. Just like, and these times it's loss. So.
That's a wonderful way of saying the point that I was making about going to the deeper level is always personal. That's the vehicle. The vehicle to the deeper level is the personal and the heart. And that's what you're sharing with us.
I would like to hear some response to our discussion from somebody outside the US. Maybe somebody from Asia, or how that lands for them, this whole discussion.
I want you to know, those of you who are outside the US, that I had you very much in mind when I was thinking about this talk and thinking, well, how is it for other places?
I would say, in terms of the opposite sides of different opinions. It should be, kind of universal. It's not about the East or the West. And even I think, according to my understanding of Chinese culture, we probably hold stronger position in kind of insisting our own view is right, and the other side is wrong. And that's that basically, if both people hold the same opinion about I'm right, and it's really difficult for people to close the gap together. I think it's easier for the Western society to find a way to kind of just close the gap.
That's so interesting, because we're saying it's almost impossible. Well, it's been impossible for us, and you're saying it's even more rigidified in a way in China.
I think for the Western society, when people try to get close to each other, it's more about something inner out. And but Chinese culture, I don't know if you know, it's kind of just very well controlled, or it's kind of very strong social rules imposed to people. And so when people try to close the gap, sometimes it's not because of this inner out reflection or willingness. Sometimes it's more about the pressure from the environment, and people have to compromise. And so for me, I think, well, on the surface level, we can say, we may have a more harmonized society. Okay, but deep inside, the harmony may not be there. And however, I think in the West, because I think people are more liberal and has more initiative on doing what they want. So when they do, they do.
Did you find that challenge of making unity meaningful?
Making unity, I would say it's a bit contradictory in me now. It feels a bit awkward to talk about whether it's, because on one hand, I think we all want to respect individuality, and people, have their own thoughts and, opinions. And on the other hand, of course, we want reconciliation, we want harmony. And so how to balance these two, it's always challenging.
I taught Vivian's classes in China, so I have a little bit of reference for what you're talking about, Vivian. What I get is that there's so much social pressure about thinking a certain way and feeling a certain way, that it's very difficult for people to come from what's inside them individually, and that it may be in the direction of disharmony first, of saying, having the courage to say, I don't feel that way about it, or I disagree, is the big challenge often, to have every voice heard. And here in the US, it's like, well, I've said what I believe, but can I really listen to what somebody else feels?
Yeah, I think it's relatively difficult for Chinese or Asian people to really step out and to outstand himself, to say something different from the others. There's a saying in Chinese, the gun will shoot the bird that flies first.
The gun will shoot the bird that flies first. Thank you, Vivian.
Yeah.
There is something that came to me, is the element of age. When I look at our gathering, if we had more young people, and maybe also from minorities, the conversation will be very different. I feel that with my younger friends, they don't process these questions the same way, and they know they don't have time. They know, they feel the urgency that we have the luxury, but they don't. That's their future, and their future is not really great right now. So that's an element that is really alive in me right now, and that I wanted to offer. Thank you.
Do we have any of our young people that would speak about how this is striking them? You know, hearing from people, it's not just that they have the right to be represented, that every voice counts, but it's so enriching. You feel so much larger when you hear from people that you don't know, and you don't know what their experience is. Jean has this idea that it isn't what we're saying, but what we're doing in the saying. And what we're doing together is to make room for all of us here.
We feel larger when we hear others' perspectives that maybe aren't our own. Things open up, the view, the lens widens. Thank you for making space for me and all of us, and just passing it on to someone else.
Well, thank you for speaking, and we'll see you next week.